Hello everybody and welcome back to Writing the Rapids, the show where I, Joe Bilecki, talk to writers about writing. Very often those writers have been recommended to me by writers who have previously been on the show. In the case of this month's guest, Max Restaino, he was recommended to me by Shane Jesse Christmas. Max is an author from Poughkeepsie, New York. He's had short work published by Filthy Loot and Southwest Review, as well as the late Witchcraft and Lygia magazines. He is also one of the many contributors to Inside the Castle 2, Revenge of the Castle Freak from Inside the Castle. Max's first book, Coyote, was published by Amphetamine Sulfate in January 2024. He has also written several nonfiction pieces for Fangoria.com. Before we get into my conversation with Max, I'll remind you that one of the best ways to support this show is through money. Patreon.com/NoisemakerJoe is the place to go. For just $2 a month, you can get these episodes a little bit earlier than everybody else, and it makes me feel mighty swell. You can also buy my book. It's called Tired. It's for sale on one of those evil websites, you know which one I'm talking about, or you can toss a one-time donation my way at paypal.me/NoisemakerJoe. If money's tight, and boy do I know it is, you can support the show by talking about it. Tell 2 people about it, and then tell them to tell 2 people about it, and before long, everyone will be listening to the show. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, leave a little dog emoji in the comments section. All of that is wonderful. Now, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Max. I like how you began Coyote with a quote from Tarkovsky that said, "If you look for a meaning, you'll miss everything that happens." When it comes to books that are out on Amphetamine Sulfate or Inside the Castle, or like Apocalypse Party to a lesser degree, the big 3.
Yeah.
I have, especially when it comes to people I'm going to be talking to on the podcast, there is an anxiety that I'm going to miss something very important or wildly incorrectly misinterpret something. Anything that would essentially just embarrass me, on the podcast. I'm always kind of worried that there's going to be something there that I'm going to be like, yeah, like, I don't really understand why you went into second person there or something. And they're like, that's the crux of the story. You really didn't read it, did you? Like that sort of thing. Very much the same sort of like college writing class, creative writing class sort of anxiety. So
definitely get that.
I liked that you started with that one for like, I think that's a good way to approach art, especially the first go around. And then secondly, for me to just be like, okay, cool, we'll just talk about what happens. And I very much enjoyed what happened in Coyote.
That's good. This is the first time we've talked since I sent it to you. So there was a part of me that was like, oh man, what if we get on the call and he was like, fucking hated this book.
Luckily in the however many years I've been doing this, that has not been the case. Where I've had to like dance around or outright lie. Like, no, it's a good book. People should read it. I do not know what I would do if
just keep coming up with excuses to not record.
I guess so. Like, oh, that would somehow even be worse. But
I get that.
Usually I have been aware of you for long enough that like, even without reading your work, I'm like, he's gonna be in the zone of taste. We're gonna vibe on some level. And usually when it's someone who I've never heard of before, I'll at least look before I send out the first cold email to see if I think. But yeah, right. Enjoyed Coyote, enjoyed the stories you sent me.
Thank you.
I am curious. I want to start with that quote also to kind of take the temperature. Like, is obviously that's just starting out one book, but is that part of like your broader approach to literature?
Um, in certain aspects, I think, um, and I think it's really, I think that it's really kind of, you know, subject like selective. Like it depends on what the project is. With with Coyote in particular, obviously, I was going to say it was intentional, but it's in the book, so of course it's intentional. But it's I think that the idea was, I felt like it served the narrative in a sense, as well as kind of, addressing some of, I think, my fears as the author, as being, because like I really was not sure that I had written anything coherent at all until other people were like, this is, good, like you should, like, um I got notes on an early draft, from El Nash, and she had told me that she could see the work with amphetamine sulfate, and I was just kind of like, that's okay, okay, whatever. And then, like, I worked on it for a while, and it got a bit longer, and um, Maggie Siebert edited the full draft, and she also said something about amphetamine sulfate, and I was like, you can't just get on amphetamine sulfate. That's But back to your point, about whether or not, like, that quote kind of applies to just my broader approach to literature. Um, I think it does, because I also have found myself in similar situations that you were describing, feeling like I might have missed something or misinterpreted something. I think a lot about, um, like, I think David Lynch's approach, and he is definitely one of my biggest influences and inspirations. So, um, there is definitely a part of me that's gotten more comfortable with my own interpretations of things, and not feeling like I need to confirm them. Like, I don't. I know people who they'll watch a movie or they'll read a novel and it'll have some kind of ambiguous ending, and then they'll need to go onto YouTube and watch, like, like, ending of, I don't know, Enemy explained. It's like, why is there a giant spider now? And it's like, to me, with, or like Coyote, it was more important that it had some kind of, like, I didn't necessarily want it, like, need it to have a through narrative that was, like, understood. I just wanted it to feel like it had some kind of emotional arc, I suppose. Not even arc, but just like a direction that it was headed in, or some kind of, like, heart to it, I suppose, that informed the different pieces. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's, you have talked on Blue Sky about, the project you're working on now that you're actively writing, and how it is becoming fragmented as you're working on it. I think
That's that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's kind of what happened with Coyote too, is that I had started writing Coyote with the idea of it being a more kind of, quote unquote, like traditional narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was gonna like work off of that. I don't even remember if it was the first scene that I had written or not, but like the idea was like, following that, like and I guess it kind of does, but in a more ambiguous way, but following the trajectory of this kid who sees this thing on TV at night.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it just, I don't know, like in the course of writing it, I I was learning about myself as a writer at that time, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And so it was, I don't know, it started to feel like it was coming apart. And then I started to think about a lot of the art that I like that doesn't, where I'm like, I don't necessarily understand what's going on, but I love it. And I think Gummo became like a real touchstone for me when I was just like, as long as all of these scenes feel good together, then maybe I don't need to tell like that story that I thought I was going to tell. And ultimately, I'm glad that this is what happened, because I, you know, learned that I just kind of, I need to follow my intuition with just going wherever the hell it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, is that due to the, like, I don't know, the fragmentation, the inability to sort of stick to a plot? Is that because you have ideas faster than you can write? Or is it, because of the art you like? Is it an image, or the emotion takes you somewhere?
Um, I think it depends, because um it's definitely influenced by a lot of art that is, I don't want to say necessarily fragmented,
Mm-hmm.
but just not um traditional.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there are a lot of like very traditional influences. uh I talk about it all over the internet, but I fucking love Stephen King, and I read a lot of Stephen King. Stephen King was pretty much like the first influence on just starting Coyote and writing like, I'm going to write a horror story. um and I think that, I don't know, I think that there it could definitely be, um I don't know if it's necessarily having ideas faster than I like am able to write. Um More than it is, um I don't know. It's definitely having a lot of ideas, and kind of finding myself incorporating so many different things that I need to, pull back at a certain point, or like, once like a draft is finished, go through and be like, all right, what really like doesn't need to be here? Um, but I don't know. I think that I end up like, if I start with a goal in mind, I like, let's say we'll talk about it in like the terms that, like, I see like Stephen King talk about like stories in terms of like, finding a like an architect,
Mm-hmm.
or not an architect, I paleontologist. Or architect could be great too if you're building a structure. But with a paleontologist, you are uncovering something that already exists, and you're like kind of just finding it piece by piece, and then like once you're able to look at it as a whole, you can figure out what it is and what doesn't need to be there and what isn't part of it, And so with the thing that I've been working on now, I've been thinking it more as like you've inherited like the home of somebody that you didn't know, and you don't know what's in the house, and before you can like do anything about this cluttered home, you need to go through all the rooms and find out what's there. So I had started with like an idea that was like, it was pretty much like it was really influenced by with the new one, the thing that I'm working on now. It was like I was basically going to be Harry Cruz's car, and They Shoot Horses, Don't They? By Horace McCoy. It would just felt like a combination of those two things. And I wasn't really gonna, I was like, I'm gonna write like, because I've been reading a lot of Harry Cruz. So I was just like, I want to write something like, weird and like, just it's very, and like I don't like, you could say that Cruz's work is like Southern Gothic, but it definitely comes at like a later period. Like I think that his first novel, The Gospel Singer, was published in the late 60s. So like you can see the Faulknerian influence on it, but Cruz doesn't do the same like dense like stream of conscious, like biblical fucking like Greek mythology things that Faulkner does. And I fucking love William Faulkner. But I was like, I just want to write like a book about weirdos that are doing like this weird thing that ends in some kind of like explosion of violence. And as I was writing it, I kept, it was like, I think that it was coming up with like right now, it's more ideas that lead to more characters. And that's what I had with Coyote. But it was just a bunch of different pieces of like things that I had, like little scenes that I had written and didn't know what to do with, or stories that I had started to write and didn't finish for whatever reason. And I was like, how can I take these and fit them together into something that feels of a piece? So as opposed to like now I'm just working like in one document, like with the idea that this is all serving kind of a central idea. It's become very different. A lot more horror influences have invaded, because I decided, fuck it, why not? I was like, are you like, you know what, I don't feel like writing, like I'll write something that is inspired by Harry Cruz. Fucking love Harry Cruz, but I'm not going to try to write a Harry Cruz novel, which is, I think that was what my original idea was. And then so I think with Coyote, I don't know if I had like, I think originally it was like, going to write like something that if Stephen King read it, he'd be like, this guy is, future horror, like this is a good horror story. But I don't know, it was I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but Frisk by Dennis Cooper, that was what really, that kind of was let me realize that I could do pretty much, like I didn't have to just tell a story straight through. I can be like,
Yeah.
You know.
I dig it, man. For one, we're here to talk about you, so you can't dominate the conversation. But for two, like those are similar to thoughts I've had.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the things for me that is very difficult is I absolutely do and always have gotten ideas faster than I can write. Like
Mm-hmm.
even if um I had a Stephen Kingian work ethic, right, where I'm writing 2,000 words every day.
Yeah.
And that's a first draft every month and a half, right?
That it's insanity.
I still think I'd be like behind.
Mm.
You were describing um you know writing this new thing as inheriting a house from a person you don't know, and I was like, I gotta write that book. That book sounds like it would be so fun to write, or like make that a found footage horror movie or something.
Oh yeah.
And like so that's the way my brain works. I don't write, and I fear using the word fragmentary
Mm.
too much,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it overplays how much is in your work. Like Coyote is, in my opinion, a through line, right? It is not a disconnected collage of images, and I don't want to give
Mm-hmm.
that impression for someone who hasn't read it, because I feel it would be dishonest to what the book is. It jumps. Uh, if you want to assign a like protagonist to it, it's maybe not even like a person. Um, and that's where I think a second or a third read and some like annotations or note taking would um, benefit an understanding of the story. Um, but so like for me, what'll happen is I'll write 20, 30,000 words and be like, oh, but this idea that's been baking for 2 months is more interesting to me now than feeling like, oh, I gotta just finish this book so I can write the next one. I just start writing the next one, and my Google Docs is a mess.
No, I think that's definitely something that I've found myself doing too. And there was a part of I almost started something new, like within like the last week and a half, 2 weeks. I just wrote down like a sentence, and I was like, that's something to explore.
Mm,
And then I was like, oh, maybe it'll fit in this thing. Or was like, why don't you start that story and like leave this one? And I was just like, relax, like just do the thing now because you're already in it.
yeah.
Like, I don't hit like high word counts. Coyote is very short,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think it's like a, it's under 14,000 words. It's between 13 and 14,000
Is it
words.
really? Wow.
Mm-hmm. That was actually, I think that was part of why some publishers were like not interested in it. They were just like, it's a, because it's a weird length.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I've been hard on myself over it sometimes. And then like I'll finish a short story that feels good,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, all right, you know what, like word count, like it's fine. But um I don't know. I feel like it's like building a house one brick at a time for me.
Yeah. I have been for years and years and years kind of obsessed with word count.
Mm.
Like my own and just others. Like, I'll grab a book off of my shelf that feels like a good sized book object, and I will count the words on a line and then how many lines on the page, and I'll multiply it, and then I'll multiply it by pages, and I'll be like, okay, yeah, this is like a 75,000 word book. Okay, that's fine. And then I'll go to another book that's similarly sized, and it'll be 90,000 words using that method, because like page thickness and book layouts and stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, you can make any book 300 pages long if you try hard enough.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what John Jeffrey does.
Yeah. Right.
I love John.
John's
I'm
fantastic.
Just giving him a hard time.
And then I'm like, well, okay, fine. But like, if I don't have a word count in mind for a particular book, how will I know when I'm done? Or how will I know when it's time to move on to Act 2? Because I've long since given up the idea that I'm going to be like a weirdo, surrealist, experimental writer. Like, no, my books are pretty recognizable. Just sometimes weird things happen inside of them. But like, I'm not ever going to have an Inside the Castle book unless I really, really, really try. And even then, I wrote a book that I was like, as I was writing it, I was like, I think this might actually be the Inside the Castle book. And then he's like, no, it's a good book, but it's not quite Inside the Castle. And I was like, okay, cool. Now I'm free. So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I have strange anxieties around art. I think when I had Christopher Norris on, I think we had stopped the recording, but I was talking about how I had like the weirdest rules for how music was supposed to be when I was like 16.
Oh man, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had a friend in one of my closest friends throughout high school who influenced he had the biggest influence on my taste in music and literature, hands down. But we had a flat out, like, just stopped being friends for a solid 6 months because he talked shit about Slipknot. And in return, I was like, well, fuck the Mars Volta.
Whoa.
And this was like 8th grade. Sure. But it was that kind of thing where it's like, no, like, fuck you and what you say about the music that like I like, because you're wrong. But like, there are, like, now we know there are no rules.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, and I for whatever reason, I have not rules for other people, but I have retained rules for myself that are like just as ambiguous, right? Like the whole like, well, those 3 members of Slipknot are essentially useless, therefore Slipknot's not a good band or whatever.
I mean, look, we're gonna talk about Slipknot. That's like a whole other fucking conversation, man. But no, I mean, I think that we all kind of impose these like weird limitations on ourselves under the guise of unattainable goals. I guess. I don't know if they're not necessarily unattainable, because I don't want to say that, like, it's unattainable for you to think that you could try to write surrealist work. If you wanted to, there's nothing that fucking stop you from doing that. But it's like something that I think about that Norris says in a lot of interviews is that, like, how he says that The Holy Day is more normal than Hunchback 88. And if you've read the Holy Day, you know it's not fucking normal.
Yeah.
But it's as normal as he can get. And he says that he always saying he wishes that he could write a beach read,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And like I think about that a lot when I'm struggling with like, oh, I want to tell like this kind of story, and find myself going into these weird, other directions. And I'm just like, you know what does it matter? Like if I need to sometimes remind myself, like, if I like it, then it's fine, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Um, in a bit of serendipity, I see you're wearing a Weird Al Yankovic t-shirt.
Hell yeah.
And like, I'm pretty sure he, like, maybe concurrent with Linkin Park, was like the first bit of musical personality that I developed outside of my parents' listening habits. It was like Weird Al and Linkin Park, which actually is essentially just like the perfect combination for how I am as a person these days.
Sure.
But I also today at work, I've been poking around on like people's NeoCities websites.
Okay.
And somebody linked to Bo Burnham's Inside. And so I just listened to it again today, and I was thinking about how much comedy music I have listened to, and music that is, if not comedy, kind of hard to take serious, or is diminished by trying to take it seriously. Like, there was a period of a couple years not too long ago where I was like only listening to horror punk and nerdcore hip hop, and like, that is like, you can't be serious about songs about Mothman or GameCubes. Like, you can only have fun about it. And
unless you're Glenn Danzig.
Yeah. And and everyone makes fun of him because what the hell are you doing, man? Just like sing your songs about skeletons or whatever and have a good time. So like, I think it was around the time I turned 30, and maybe I've talked about this before on the podcast, where I was really only listening to like Blitzkid and Demented Are Go and stuff like that. It's like Christmas Eve, driving to my parents' house, and we got the Misfits on in the car because I don't want to listen to Christmas music. I want to listen to Halloween music.
Right.
And I was just like, okay, fine. I'm done pretending I'm anything other than just an absolute like goofball, Hot Topic weirdo. I can't do it anymore. 'Cause I remember like in middle school, I was like, I need to be quiet and dark and mysterious. That's the type of person I want to be. I want to be the brooding vampire in the corner. And I'm just like, I can't keep my mouth shut long enough. I can't go that long without cracking jokes. I like dark stuff an awful lot, but I like it because it's fun for me. And it's been very freeing to just be like, oh yeah, I'm just messing around.
I've thought about that similarly about myself, like how I guess I've just kind of attributed it to be like becoming an adult, and be just basically just being like, you know what, I'm gonna actually I'll like the things that I like, and I don't need to like I can't be like, I don't need to be like, I fucking punk and listen to Minor Threat, and like I'm not gonna fucking listen to, like, it was at first it started as like that, like, I'm too punk to listen to fucking My Chemical Romance and Taking Back Sunday, who are both like fucking great bands if you ask me, or they at least each have a great album. And then in high school it was like, oh, I don't want to fucking listen to like stupid, like, caveman metal and shit. I listened to fucking like, Battles and Hella and Terra Melos, and now it's like it's cool. It's all good. It's like I can listen to Cranium and then Neil Young and then fucking Hella, whatever. Like I don't need to, I think that when you are young, you don't realize that other people are doing the same thing that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't like you don't see anybody who like, you're not inspired by somebody else necessarily to be like, oh, maybe it is okay to like admit that I like quote unquote conflicting things.
Mm-hmm. And in the Norris episode, I wanted to kind of bring up that point about Green Room, and we got sidetracked talking about Nazi bars.
I just want to say, by the way,
yeah,
fucking excellent point that he makes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Green Room is a great movie. It really is. I love that movie. I love Jeremy Saulnier as a filmmaker. Blue Ruin is one of my favorite movies ever. But Norris is absolutely right about
the entire premise of the film.
Yeah, just the fact, like a band, like no, like I also played in touring bands and shit in like my 20s, and like we weren't really. It was twee punk,
sure.
We were like so very scrawny guys.
Yeah, the really short jean shorts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like the band. But
I had just seen because Law Dispute is from Grand Rapids, I get old Law Dispute videos on Instagram all the time, and I had just seen one where the singer's got just the shortest little jean shorts I've ever seen.
But you wouldn't play at a Nazi bar. But anyway, back to what you were gonna say that he distracted you from. I don't want to do the same shit that he did.
Just, I mean, that it takes them, losing their friends and dying themselves to admit that actually I like Madonna. Madonna's fine, like, yeah, that's, and I feel like in 2026, I feel like the teens don't have that kind of pressure that we might have felt, because we're about the same age. I'm 33.
Yeah, I'm just turned 34. So
yeah, so we grew up in the same zeitgeist.
Exactly.
And yeah, the teens that are at the shows I go to know all the words to the 3-6 Mafia songs they play while the bands are setting up, and they know all the words to the hardcore bands, the local hardcore bands that are playing too, and they've all that stuff. They're all doing fun gender stuff that we would have never ever done.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
When we were their age, without knowing how to fight really well.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I kind of feel like, maybe I'd be interested in 10 years to read like a nostalgic high school book by someone who's 18 now.
Me too. Because everybody who's writing books about high schoolers now is pretty far removed from high school, and I think that just based on what I see, through like what social media shows me, just because like there aren't really any young people that I interact with, it seems like things have changed quite a fucking bit. Like not even just like in the fucking 16 years or whatever since we graduated high school, but even just like in the last 5 years, like it's the whole thing about like chat GPT and like AI writing essays, and people don't know like if the students are submitting their own work or not. And I don't know, they're like, aside from like the fact that they're fucking passing legislation that is like, taking away books for kids to fucking read, like it's, I don't know, it would be really interesting to see that perspective. I agree, from somebody who is experiencing this firsthand.
Yeah. And I remember going into high school, even middle school, being aware of movies about high schoolers, and like the idea of cliques, fashion based cliques, was really strong in movies from the 90s or the 80s. Being in middle school and high school in the 2000s, it was like still there to an extent. Like the kids who exclusively shopped at Aeropostale were not talking to the kid who had the trip pants. But like, in so much as I hung out with the goth kids, it was like, well, we all like Tenacious D sort of thing. Like, yeah, so and so wears the big old strappy Hot Topic pants, and the rest of us only wear blue jeans, but everyone's got either like a metal t-shirt or like a nerd t-shirt, rest in peace jinx.com, and and we're not going to hang out with the pastel polo shirt crowd. But like, it was not well defined. Like, there was crossover. There was definitely like, oh, we're friends with so and so, and no one's worried about social suicide or anything like that.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that I went to a really small high school. I went to public school, but the school that I went to was still like, my graduating class was like 130 kids tops. So, we all knew each other, and there were only like 2 elementary schools that like came together for the middle school and high school. So we all knew each other, and we'd all known each other since we were fucking kids. So it didn't by any means mean that everybody got along whatsoever. It's just that by the time we were in high school, we had all just well figured out, like, these are the people that I interact with, and these are not the people that we interact with.
Yeah, my graduating class of high school was over 500. So the idea that there even could be cliques, like, nah, dude, it's just like, there are people and people and don't like, and then there's everybody else. My high school had a freshman campus, and then 10th, 11th, and 12th grade was in another building. The part of it had to do with like, when the high school was built, they built it not big enough on purpose because they were going to build another one, and then when the time came to vote on the millage for the another one, they said everyone voted no. And so they were like, well, shit, what are we gonna do? And so they built a freshman campus. Which is why East Kentwood High School is in the western part of Kentwood, because they were going to build a West Kentwood High School, even wester, and they never got the money for it, which is indicative of a lot of things about my upbringing and education, I think. But yeah, like, with regards to our writing, and I'm bringing it back. We're reeling in the big fish.
Yeah, for sure.
Just like, it's funny to me, there are 2 pieces of writing that like, I think I've posted, but like haven't been published, so like it's kind of hard to find them. But literally, like, the 2 things I'm most proud of writing, had the most fun writing, and if I had to like imagine the ideal, like, how people are going to perceive me as a writer, those things are not that. Again, they're like wacky and silly, and like, one of them has like several very blatant references to the Cramps and
Okay.
just like silly stuff, dark
Mm-hmm.
and moody and kind of grimy, but like ultimately kind of silly. And you know what it is all of that stuff comes from listening to Blitzkid and Bloodhound Gang and mindless self-indulgence while also, stroking my chin watching David Lynch movies or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I'm curious for you, kind of in that same vein, that like Stephen King is,
Mm.
mainstream, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, I think that I generally refer to him as popular fiction.
Sure. And you've mentioned David Lynch and Harmony Korine movies and Tarkovsky too. And so like having the foundation of King, right? Because I feel like a lot of people who I talk to who write weirder books, experimental books, whatever, amphetamine, sulfate, etc. type books are like, oh yeah, I read like Bataille when I was in middle school or something.
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, dog, I didn't know who the hell that was until like
Right.
30 episodes into doing this podcast.
Oh yeah.
So I wonder if like having King as that sort of foundation for you, if you notice that like steering a way that you write.
So I didn't really start writing prose fiction until like 2020. Before, like, for a long time, like before the pandemic, and I've always been a Stephen King fan. That stems from my dad having books on his bookshelf when I was a kid, and just being like, what is like this drooling, foaming dog, like, maw that is staring at me, just like basically just being obsessed with the Cujo cover and like the paperback Night Shift that had the bandage hand on it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like the double cover or cutout cover with the eyes. So that was, Stephen King like introduction, basically, like as a horror fan, like as a kid. Stephen King was the first person who I was heard of, that it was like, oh, he's a guy that makes scary stuff. Um, I think that, and so that what that comes, but anyway, that's introduction to Stephen King, to say that he's always been there. Like I've always admired Stephen King greatly. But I was, for a long time, throughout high school and college and until about 2020, I was really just hyper fixated with movies. And I watched hundreds of movies a year, and I went to film school. And in 2020, I had worked through, like, from February to October. So like it wasn't really because of the pandemic, but I was laid off in October of that year. And that Christmas, my best friend bought me The Gunslinger. And that was just kind of like an insane aha moment, where I realized, like, oh, reading is not as difficult as it was for me growing up, because I have like treated ADD and anxiety and things like that now, which is not to say that they're perfect, but they're being treated now, and they weren't when I was a kid. So I was like, why is reading so hard? And it's like, because you have 1.5 million fucking things going on in your head right now, and I was trying to read in high school. I was trying to read shit like Blood Meridian, and I was like, I can't do this. But when I was in high school, I think there were like 4 books that I actually read, And I had read, like, when I was a kid, I had read some like short stories by Stephen King, but the novels, just the length was always so daunting that I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I hear about people who, like, so many people say that they read it when they were a kid, which, and like, it's not that I don't believe them, it's that I think that it was an insane thing to be allowed to happen. And
Yes.
also just like very different from how I was as a kid, where if I had seen like a book that long and they were like, read this, I would have been like, I want to watch Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
But the King Foundation is really, I think, just, if anything, it's a very solid foundation to have, to like try like Christopher Norris type bullshit on, where it was like, I can fall, like, I don't know, I can write a horror story, I guess, because like when the first couple of pieces that I'd published were just, they, especially the first thing that I ever published is a story that's called The Right Seed. And that's just like a straight, like, horror story about a writer. And, it's, I think it's flavored a little bit with something that has become a theme for me, in that it is about a man who he's dying on the floor of his cabin because he shot himself incorrectly.
Mm.
And while he's lying there on the floor, he feels like there was something that he forgot to do, but he can't remember what it is. And so that's like, it's really just, that was, I wrote that before I had really read, like, before I had gotten into really any, like, even been introduced to a lot of the like small press stuff, which then led me to being, I think, more interested in the things that influenced small press authors. Like, I wrote that story, and I was friends with Maggie Siebert because I had met her when I was on tour with my band in 2015, and she was living in Montana. And I've talked about this before, so I don't necessarily need to rehash it again. But it was through Maggie that, like, I had learned about small press stuff. And I wanted her to read my story, but like, I was like, I don't, like, ended up just submitting it to the site that she was working with at the time, instead of like waiting for her to read it as like a pal. But then she was like, oh, I'll publish this, and I was like, oh, that's weird, cool. But then from there, I had read, that led to me reading her book, which led to me reading like Dennis Cooper, and then reading Gary J. Shipley and B.R. Yeager, and, just becoming familiar with all the other small presses. And from there, gathering more influences, like finding the books that felt like the movies that I really connected with, like ones that I like. Oh, I fucking love like Hollywood action movie, man. Like, straight up, I really do like it. But at the same time, like, obviously Gummo, Eraserhead, but then like a lot of more contemporary stuff that is just kind of dreamy and nonlinear and feel like, so things like Sun Don't Shine is a film by Amy Seimetz, who she's an actress. She's been in. I'm trying to. She plays Rachel Creed in the remake of Pet Cemetery, but she's also a writer and director. And she made this movie that I saw in film school called Sun Don't Shine, and it's just such like it's almost like pretending to be a fairy tale, but it's like this swampy Florida like crime drama, but it just feels so like dreamy and magical. And I don't know, it's really special. And it was, you know, the type of thing that has a story, but is also just like it was more about like the mood of it was really what struck me. And I started finding, you know, books outside of just traditional horror where it was really like the mood and the language really struck me and stayed with me, and kind of, I guess I'll say, changed how I approached putting words down.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a thing that happens with me, and I wonder if it happens with you. Where you'll read something in a book or see something in a movie, or even hear something in a song or something, and say, oh man, I want to try to do that. And like, without studying it too hard, you make the attempt. And then you kind of look at it and see, like, okay, I didn't do that. Like, I failed at copying it, but what I've done, you know, instead, is actually kind of cool. Like, do you find that happening?
I think that that's kind of what has happened with anything that I've written that I particularly like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think, you know, Coyote failed at what I set out to do when I started writing that, in that it was not a traditional narrative, you know? Um, but it's genuinely the most like personal thing that I've ever written. And it means a lot to me in that sense. But it also just kind of helped me realize that I could express myself in that way, and that there are people that are going to respond to it, even if, you know, I have a hard time trusting my own instinct about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, something like even my the story in Body Punk,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I that was some. I think when I was writing that, I was like, this is going to be a novel. Like, this will be my first novel. That's a thought that I have when I start almost any fucking story that I write,
Oh,
is this is
fantastic.
going to be a novel, and then it doesn't end up being a novel. Um, but that's okay, because sometimes, like, you know, you get to a point where if you give things enough distance, and this is something that I've learned from Stephen King, because he takes like 6 weeks between finishing a draft and beginning revisions,
Mm-hmm.
um, where, like, the story that I have in the Southwest Review horror issue that Jaeger edited last October. I wrote that, and I was like, whatever. Like, I don't even know like what I was doing. I thought it was just like, nobody's gonna get this except for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when he asked me about a story, I was like, "Oh yeah," and I had a bunch of other ones in mind that like I had written a while back, and I read through those, and they were ones that I had like, you know, quote unquote finished,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, these aren't good." And like in looking through the files of like, Word documents and shit like that, I found the one that is in there.
Mm-hmm.
I read that for the first time pretty much since I wrote it, which was several months in between, and I was like, "Oh, there actually is something here." So I think that it's good to recognize that those quote unquote failures become uh, successes of their own, um, because it it is just reinforces the idea that you probably know better than like your overthinking brain tells you that you do.
Mm. I like that. That's a nice little bit of comfort
Yeah.
to take away. Um, Before we get out of here, I want to make sure that we talk about something I noticed in the three pieces of yours that I read. It's
Hmm.
your brand of body horror is this sort of like invasion of the body um that like isn't necessarily like sickness. Like it is like a sort of like it's somewhere between like parasite and like spiritual possession
Mm.
that I like the overall sort of like very like griminess um to the worlds you created in your writing. I really like I maybe this is maybe not apt, um but as you were talking about movies, I was thinking about um especially your dreamier ones. I was thinking about how um I like what Neon does better than A24.
I think that there are a lot of cases where I agree. I think that Neon, there are a lot of things that need, like, A24 has put out a lot of terrific movies, but they put out a lot of very samey movies
Mm-hmm.
that are easy to forget.
Yeah.
I think that the things that Neon does, they tend to stand on their own a bit more. They don't necessarily like. I think that a lot of A24 movies um, are definitely helped by having that logo
Yeah.
on their advertising, and Neon doesn't need like if I see a Neon logo on a poster, I might think, "Oh, cool, this is something that I might like."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't like it's not the selling point
Yeah.
generally. Like it's usually on something that even without it, I'm like, okay, this is something I will probably like.
Yeah. Um and I bring that up in the context of your work because there's um like in opposition to A24. Because um there's like horny body horror, even if it's not necessarily like erotic. um it's like a, I don't know, a sexual body horror
Sure.
that is when I was talking to Shelley Levine, and I think it was just the last episode, they were talking about how like there is a coziness to a type of body horror, um
Hmm.
and we explored that. And then your work does not have that coziness, um and I feel like the A24 Neon dichotomy works there because A24 is that sort of like cozy, sexy body horror where even if it's uncomfortable, there's kind of like an ooh sort ofness to it. And Neon movies tend to make me just feel kind of gross, um,
Sure.
uh, which isn't a bad thing. Um, like neon movies feel sweatier, and so like the body horror in your writing is that kind of like just it's got that like sweatier, dirtier, stickier sort of quality to it, even though it doesn't have a lot of the more like fluid, mucusy type things.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate that. First of all, I think I will absolutely accept that comparison. I think that there's definitely like, so when a lot of people are writing body horror, they're writing about um intimacy in one way or another, whether it's like intimacy with themselves or intimacy with a partner. And I feel like in if I don't know, there's, to me, the it like I don't know. I think that it represents like more um the embodiment of like accepting the um the issue, I suppose, not necessarily the issue, because that's not always what it is. I think that the characters that I write generally are faced with something that they want to reject in some way or don't understand and need to frame in a way that makes sense or makes them feel better about themselves. You know, in Coyote the Intruder, um, relieves the narrator of culpability for the things that he doesn't want to think about, you know? Um, and where was I going with that?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
No, that's cool. I do it all the time. Um, there are no tracks. Yeah, yeah, the discomfort is different. It's a different kind of discomfort. I really need to like publish a zine somewhere about my theory of body noir, so that I can stop referencing a Google Doc that no one's read. But this idea that like, and body noir doesn't necessarily fit exactly Coyote or Earth Eater or anything like that. But there's this like the body itself is horror. And you know, you have this story where like he does like self trepanation, right? He's got like the migraine, and like that's much more body noir in my estimation than Coyote is. Coyote's doing, again, that's this sort of you know, parasitic fungus meets demonic possession, something or other.
And I think that's the Stephen King foundation.
Okay.
You know, is that it starts with like the idea of, it's like, you know, that exactly that. Like there was a lot of fungus and parasites and things like that. And I don't even remember where I thought Coyote might go when I started it, but like that's definitely like the link back to King, is that like horror foundation.